Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone to And She Thrive, which serves to hold space for Muslim divorced women. I'm very blessed this morning to be with Ustadha Fatima Oyen Waley, who's calling in from the UK. And I've also been fortunate enough to have spent quite a bit of time with her and gleaned from her experience and insights of her very fascinating life. And I would like to welcome you this morning. Assalamu alaikum, Ustadha Fatima. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, well, thank you. How are you?
I am good. Thank you very much. So I'd like to share with our community about you. Ustadha Fatima embraced Islam as a young woman in 1979 and has worked with Muslim women and children over the past several decades in various capacities, including education, parenting education, informal marriage and divorce counseling, helping religious people who are seeking suitable spouses, and community work. She has experience of divorce in her personal life with family members and in the context of helping younger couples in a spiritual community. She has no formal counseling qualifications or training, however, and she advises everyone to seek professional guidance as and when needed, and to constantly seek Allah's help in patience and prayer. So the first question I'm going to ask you is for women out there who are currently married, but they are considering getting divorced, what would you say to them?
Right. So I would sincerely advise my sisters that they must be completely convinced that they have no other alternative before seeking a divorce, before insisting on a divorce. Sometimes you need a break from each other to get a little perspective. You could go away for, have a separation for 4 or 6 weeks, see how things are without your spouse. You might then be able to look less emotionally at a situation. But my personal advice would be, especially if there's any children involved, to be, there should be something very substantial that has been, going on for quite some time, and you feel convinced that it's not going to change before thinking, oh, I need to take this step for divorce. For instance, like as an example, drug addiction or alcohol use, or like persistent, physical or emotional or spiritual abuse that cannot be managed, and that becomes extreme, for instance, this kind of a thing, or gambling. I'm talking about big sins or very, very difficult situations where the family, life cannot be established properly, especially if there's children. If there are no children involved and both sides are quite clear that they think it's not working, then it's less of a big decision, but it's still a big decision in the sense that it's always harder for women to get remarried than men. And so a woman still puts herself essentially at a disadvantage by being, by having divorce. And a lot of times, especially if in religious communities, people would possibly assume it could have to do more with the woman. These are just strange cultural norms. I don't know, but it's something to bear in mind, that it would be harder for a woman to get remarried after divorce than a man necessarily. So it's something that you want to really think about, because it is difficult to be single as well. Now, if we're talking about having children, if you have children are involved, really, it's important to understand, and I don't think that women necessarily understand this, that if you share children, you have children in common with your ex-husband, that ex-husband will never be out of your life. That person is going to be in your life for the rest of your life. They're going to be involved in parent-teacher meetings or like graduation ceremonies. They're going to be involved in choice of school. They're going to be involved in, you're going to have grandchildren together. They're never going to be out of your life. So you have to think about, is it really definitely 100% worth it to get this person out of my life now? Because I can never completely get him out of my life. So you're always related to each other. And if you have main custody, what tends to happen with children is they tend to idealize the other parent, the non-custodial parent, and they tend to blame the parent that's handily available, which is you. So that's another issue where you can get blamed by the children for things that may not be your fault whatsoever, but because there's no other parent around to blame, and because they really want to see both of their parents, and because the other parent is like the one they see on the weekends or every 2 weeks or occasionally or something, that person gets a bit idealized. And so, and that person, because they're not there every day disciplining, for instance, is doing all these fun and cool things with the children while you're become the disciplinarian in daily life or something. So these are things that tend to happen. If you don't have that scenario and you have like a 50-50 distribution of parenting, then that parent is in your life all the time anyway, 50% of the time, essentially. You're talking to them every week about what are you going to do. And that makes it difficult for a remarriage because the new husband may not be that keen to marry someone who has this ex-husband in their life so frequently, and where they're having all this constant interaction about children that are not his children. And so there's just a lot of potential there for conflict and for difficulty. So bearing in mind, the children they have a right to have access to their father and also his relatives. They have a right to have this relationship, even where mothers have like fled their husbands, their ex-husbands, for instance, not necessarily in a Muslim context, but imagine, and they've taken them maybe because of safety reasons, because their lives are endangered. Imagine. It's extremely common that when the child gets to be 11, 12, 13 years old, 14 years old, they are going to go and find that father because they just need to know about that part of their life. They are going to try to reestablish that connection with this missing part of their life. So even if you try to shield them from everything, that's half of their identity. And if their father's not available, if he's in prison or if he's in the army or I don't know, they're going to try to find their other relatives. And so essentially, you will always be connected to that first husband if you have children together. So you really have to consider it. It's got to be a very extreme circumstance. Like, for instance, you're just coming to Islam and the ex-husband, is a non-Muslim. Okay, yeah, you divorce. He's an atheist or he's, I don't know, Jewish or Christian or Hindu or something. So you become Muslim, alhamdulillah. So that becomes a necessity. And there's other situations, that are similar. They become necessities or they're very urgent. But it's something, divorce has been on the rise for a long time. And the divorce rate in the Muslim community is very similar to what it is among non-Muslims, if not the same. And that's because I think Muslims have started to take on unrealistic expectations of what marriage is, especially women romanticizing and idealizing things that are supposed to happen based on what they've seen in the movies or on TV serials or something, which is really just not reflective of daily life, like true daily life. And there's interesting books. I've been watching, reading this author for a period of time, John Gottman, and I'm trying to think his wife's name. But he has a book, Why Marriages Succeed or Fail. I think that came out about 20 years ago or something. And he was one of the first, along with his team, to hook up couples in his office to monitor their blood pressure and their heart rate and all this kind of thing, and to have them argue about something which, talk about something they disagreed about. And he found that he could predict with a great deal of accuracy who was going to be divorced within 2 years and who wasn't. And it had to do with how they argued about things and how they spoke with each other. So he then, he presented kind of a plan in that book of how you can understand your partner better and come to a better way of discussing things and understanding, genders understanding each other and that kind of thing. People having different arguing styles, whether they're avoidant, whether they're validating, or they're, volatile. So those are interesting insights which people might want to have a look at that. The Gottmans also wrote, subsequent books which are also valuable. I think there's something to do with 7 principles of make marriage work and this kind of thing. So it's good for a person to educate themselves.
Can I interject though? I mean,
sure.
I hear you. My question, and I can hear the other questions of women with ask that, okay, well, I would love for my marriage to work, but my husband is not interested in counseling. He's not interested in getting an arbitrator. So like, I'm at my wit's end, and I would rather be in my own space and still deal with him partially than deal with this tremendous unhappiness that's just not going to change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think what I'm trying to say is try to make sure that one's, expectations are realistic and not sort of
like fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, they shouldn't be fantasy expectations. But if there's real, what I'm saying is you don't want to regret it. Don't have a divorce now and then regret that you didn't really try everything. Because if you tried everything, you're not going to have regrets. Then, between you and Allah, you speak to Allah, and like if you feel okay, like this situation is intolerable. My life is in danger. My children's life is in danger. Or this is just totally not tenable as a situation. I can't cope. So, then you will not have those regrets. What you don't want to be in a situation is that where later you regret and you think, well, was it actually that bad? And maybe I was being, unrealistic. So you try.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Obviously, you can get different. I mean, don't speak to lots of people because that also can be disorienting. And people give lots of different kinds of advice. But if you had an older person who you felt was very wise and they had a lot of experience, that could be a good person to turn to. Obviously, an imam or a scholar who can give you advice, a sheikh who has a lot of insights, they may give you advice. If you have something like that in your life already, that's quite useful. Alhamdulillah.
But I do want to say that one has to be careful about the advice, because I have known situations where the woman was in an unhappy marriage, but every time she'd go see the scholar, he'd say, oh, marriage is a big blessing. You must be patient, be patient. And she literally got through the years by these be patients type. And then eventually, when she did it, she thought, wow, like I could have been divorced like 8 years ago. But she was just kind of holding on by these people who actually didn't know what it's like to be in an unhappy marriage, but were just kind of giving this like nasiha to endure and to, because why? Because there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the husband. He's not abusing you. He's actually a believer. He's kind-hearted, etc. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with him. Like he's not mistreating you in a big way,
Right.
So I don't know.
Well, I mean, the thing is, if a woman can take that, yeah, if a woman could take that as a kind of spiritual path, and if she could say to herself, this is my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I'm going to sacrifice this, this happiness, my idea of happiness, because I have my children, and I'm exchanging then a known quantity for an unknown, because the future without your husband is then unknown. It could be worse or it could be better. People think, well, it will be better. It could be better in one way, and it could be worse in another way. And ultimately, that other way that it could be worse could be more, important. Yeah, you can have greater.
You have to pick your hardship. Do you want your hardship in this marriage that you're struggling with, or do you want your hardship being like a divorcee, perhaps a single mom, which set up challenges? Yeah.
But I mean, but the thing is that single mom, it's because it's unknown. Just like before you get married, you don't know what marriage is. Mm-hmm. And then, but also before you divorce, you don't know what divorce is. And so the kind of things that can happen to you in your community who normally always love you when you're divorced, and your supportive scholar sisters could say, for instance, suddenly you notice that they're taking distance to you. And I'll just give you an example, because they think that you're young and beautiful and desirable, and they're worried that their husband might be interested in you as a second wife. So you might find that you have less sisterhood, which you would not necessarily expect. Or you might find that you marry someone who looks like maybe very religious and the right kind of person that you want, and then that person is actually abusive to your children. And then you end up with a second divorce. And so there's things that you can't know about it in advance. And that's why I say you just have to really think about it carefully, very carefully, and pray a lot of istikhara. And, it's ideally you would have a support system, right? You can have someone in your family who's on your side and who's going to support you. And because, being a woman alone taking care of children is very difficult. For instance, the hardest situation would be a convert, a revert, whose family is basically against Islam, who didn't like your husband in the first place, for instance, imagine, and after you divorce is going to be just trying to get those children to be some other religion or way, or not to have a religion or something like that. So you have to have that kind of support system, and that's not very easy necessarily. Modern day people are very busy with their own lives. They want to help you, but they don't necessarily have time for you. So these are things, and there is loneliness, So if you have a strong support system, alhamdulillah, you have to also think about finances, which can be a big problem for lots of people. So, how are you going to solve that problem? So there's just, subhanallah, Allah has made a lot of, there's a lot of blessing in marriage, just in the structure of the marriage itself, without even like the personal relationship, just the fact of marriage. It's, it's a building block of society. And yeah, a lot of individual people living in their own apartments is just not going to make a society. So yeah. And for a woman to go, if she doesn't have children, to go back to her parents' house, it can be demeaning as well. And the parents may keep on treating her like she was a child, and, all these kind of things. She doesn't have her independence. So it just depends on the situation. If she is, got a decent job, and maybe the husband wasn't working, and she was supporting him all the time, and he's just a deadbeat, whatever. I don't know, this kind of, no, I mean, stuff. I'm not gonna, accuse people, but imagine then her situation is a little easier. But not easy because she has to have time for both the work and also for her children at the end of the day, and she has to find the right kind of childcare. And so if the husband was looking after the children, sometimes the children will miss that as well. So you have to think about those things. And also with the issue of remarriage, the father can remarry, and then the children will be going to him and this other unknown person who you're very likely to be jealous of, who's going to have all other kind of ideas about child raising, child rearing. So you have no idea what her ideas are going to be, or what her culture is going to be, or anything. So these are the things which I'm not saying people should be, scared of it, but you have to think, like, it really has to be weighed carefully, basically.
Be realistic, essentially. So,
yeah.
Okay. And then for somebody who is divorced now and she's just overwhelmed with the whole newly divorced thing, what would you advise her?
Well, I mean, return to Allah at every moment, every day, and just seek Allah's help, because Allah really does open up things for people in unexpected ways. And the time of need is, and when a servant of Allah knows that they have need, it's the time that Allah is going to be closest to them. They're going to feel closest, and acknowledging their weakness, and Allah will open up things. But one has to put things in perspective. It's important, if you have children particularly, not to try to avoid long periods of sitting around looking depressed, crying in front of the children, and this kind of thing, because it really does affect the children. And it's typical, say, for instance, they've done studies of mothers with postpartum depression, where the mothers believe they're giving a lot of time and attention to the children, but actually, when recorded, they aren't. They're very self-absorbed. So it's important to try to be not self-absorbed, because if you withdraw from your child, the child is likely to withdraw from you, because they try to get your attention. They don't really get your attention. They're unsuccessful. They get kind of frustrated. They give up. And then they just look for attention somewhere else.
But how do you handle this, this avalanche that you feel, this waterfall of emotion that she's just consumed by, and she doesn't know how to deal with it? I mean, this is real grief, mourning, maybe depression. And so how would you?
It's challenging. I mean, like I said, if you have friends that can take them, out for a bit while you have time to be alone, you try not to fall apart like in front of the children. Basically, try to keep it together. Just like when we're married as well, try to avoid a lot of argumentation in front of the children and so forth. It's not always possible, but try to manage one's emotions. There's different kind of natural remedies that one can take for this as well. People can seek different kinds of alternative therapies and remedies. I've heard of all kinds of things that could be useful. There's homeopathy, there's tapping, there's herbal, there's lavender. I mean, try to do positive.
So techniques to release the
massage. So try to find some techniques to help you deal with that. Light therapy. Look at the blue sky. There's all kinds of this. Surround yourself with positivity to the extent that you can, so that at least in the presence of the children, they're feeling secure and that everything's going to be okay. Those are important messages to convey to the children. If you're in front of the children and you're not conveying a kind of confidence and security that everything's going to be okay, they're going to definitely feel it. And then that leads to other issues. Then you start to be distracted with, behavior problems of your children, and, issues at school and issues with their friends. And then that just adds to your problems, basically. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And many women, they struggle with finances post-divorce, because if they've been the dependent in the family. Do you have any advice to give them?
Yeah. Well, I think that every married woman should have some experience managing finances. It's very important to have some things in her own name. I'm very surprised to find sometimes women have been married and they've had no bills in their own name. They have no credit history. Everything's in their husband's name. This is really undesirable. Even if your husband became ill and was in the hospital, or anything, happened to him, you have to be able to manage. And that would not be the moment when you would be starting to want to learn about those things, like the moment when your husband's like hospitalized or ill, or, something's happened to him.
Crisis situation.
That's not the right moment to be learning about finances. So it's something that, you should learn about before then. You should have some bills in your name so that the utility companies know who you are. And, you should have your own bank account as well as maybe a joint account, depending. I mean, one method that can work well for couples is that they have one joint account for household expenses, and then each of the couple also have their own accounts. But anyway, in this modern world, assuming you're living in United States, Canada, UK, or someplace like that, everyone needs to have a kind of a visibility in terms of their they need to have a financial history, because otherwise, if you need any kind of help, no one knows who you are and you have no credit history. And then you're going to have to get people to sign for you, even to rent an apartment or something like that. You're going to have other people, you have to ask other people to help sign for you, and, to guarantee that you're going to pay things. And that's just embarrassing and awkward. And so, you have to work on that. I mean, the first thing to do is reduce expenses. So if you've been living quite a comfortable lifestyle, you just have to figure out what's a minimum lifestyle so that you don't have a lot of expenses and don't go into debt, inshallah. And if you don't know how to do that, then try to speak to some sisters that you might know who live maybe much more simply than you do. Learn how to make healthy meals with rice and beans, and just simple things, and learn how to buy things in bulk and, cheaply, and, learn how to live on oatmeal and potatoes and things which don't cost a lot of money, and, tomato paste and stuff like that. So once you learn how, and just keep it, healthy and simple. And if you have an expensive car, downsize your expensive car. If you live in a large place, just downsize, because you can easily have your expenses, and then you have, a lot of people in America that I've known, they could have their expenses at possibly lower than that and still live quite comfortably and be okay. And then they wouldn't have the constant worry about finance over their head in the same kind of way. So obviously, if you have a crisis, then you're going to be looking at things like, charities that help people in crisis and so forth, but try to minimize what you need. Put away some dresses and clothing, wear them next year, reduce, so, half your wardrobe, put things away for next year, don't wear them all out, stuff like that. Try to find things that you can do from home, if you can do some work from home, or whatever you need to do to pay bills. But that's going to completely vary according to people's situation, obviously, what their background is, how much education they have, how employable they are, that kind of thing. If people have been doing housekeeping, homemaking, and so forth, they've been a wife and mother for the last 10 or 15 years, go to somebody who can help you write a resume or a CV, and take all of your skills and experiences and your multitasking as a mother and turn that into something that looks, presentable on a CV, because you do have experiences that count, that can be quite useful in a variety of jobs.
Could you give an example? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So don't just discount that. If you're organizing several children and you're doing work for the community and you've been helping out at, different events and so forth, that all counts as work experience. It can be turned into, language that will count as work experience. If you go to a professional job counselor, they can show you how to do that. That's one of the services you can get, so that, that you have, you tell them what you've done and they turn that into something that looks proper on a resume, and then you can explain it further. So if you're looking for work, not to discount that.
Okay. Yes, what you're saying reminds me of when I interviewed my friend Naima Abraham, and she said that if you are married and you know the divorce is coming, don't rush into your divorce. You should actually plan for your divorce. So whether
Right.
it's acquiring certain skills, getting a certain job, making yourself more financially savvy, it doesn't have to happen overnight,
Yeah.
So that was valuable advice. So moving on to now, the woman has been divorced for a while. She feels that she's, gotten over any of the hardship or grief over that, and she's pretty much content with her life, wants to move on. What would you say regarding a healthy perspective towards marriage? And I'm saying this because there are many people who get married and the marriage fails due to they themselves being raised in dysfunctional families or having a distorted perception of what marriages are like from media, Hollywood, Bollywood, etc. And just even now in social media, I mean, it's saturated with information about relationships, and the expectations are very, very high. So what would you say would be a healthy, wholesome attitude towards having a happy marriage, contented, happy, peaceful marriage?
Right. I think that before thinking about remarriage, I think that women should get in a place where they feel happy with their life as it is. So they're not feeling like they desperately need a husband, because being in a situation of neediness, I think tends to attract the wrong kind of potential people, where you could then end up with, another bad situation. Because there's.
Can I ask you something about this point though, about neediness?
Mm.
How needy is needy? And I'm asking that because there are people out there who their life is fine, like they enjoy being a mother, they do have some income, they are part of a community, and their life is overall pretty much okay. They have a fairly amicable relationship with their ex-husband, etc. But there is need, there's a desperate need to be loved and to be in a relationship. Now, is that needy? Is that needy? Isn't that like a normal, healthy neediness? Especially based on your temperament. Certain temperaments are more, they seek more deeper connection than others, if you know about temperaments.
Right.
So how needy is needy? Because
I
always
think
I think I'm blamed. Oh, you should be completely independent. You should not need a man. But aren't we are interdependent human beings? Like we desperate. It's so human to crave that love and affection.
Yeah. I mean, I think that if one is feeling desperate or needy, then that gets projected to the potential future spouse, which either, chases them away, or, it can attract a person who's inclined to take advantage of that woman in some kind of way. And so I'm talking about it from a kind of a self-protection point of view. Oh, so either they are going to see, well, this woman is a bit desperate, so therefore I can bargain her down on these different things. I don't need to necessarily, have a proper marriage with her, because, all she really wants is X or Z, Y or Z. So then you're not going to necessarily get the caliber of person that you want to have. Or then the right kind of person feels like a bit intimidated by that's feeling that neediness, So that's the thing I'm talking about. So in a way, if we can reflect and be a mirror of the kind of spouse we would like to find, like basically a male kind of version of ourselves that will fit into our lives nicely or complement our lives nicely. But that we're not desperate to have, for instance, someone come and discipline our children because our children are out of hand, or, we're not like totally desperate for money because otherwise, we're going to be like homeless, or, what I'm saying? So, I mean, this is the kind of problem which then attracts the wrong kind of spouse. I'm going to say that. And anyhow, a second marriage statistically is more difficult than the first marriage, because there's issues, in particular in relation to previous children of previous marriages, and also finances. For instance, it's quite typical that a previously married woman with children would be looking to marry again another man who's also been previously married and has children. That man is going to have financial responsibilities toward his children. It takes more effort and energy to try to make a blended family. So all of these things, they're things that one has to consider. So it's the children and the child rearing aspect and the financial aspects put a lot of pressure on remarriages. So it's something that, you have to be pretty together with yourself and your own life. So, I mean, the first thing, depending on how old you are, you're really looking for a spiritual companion. I'm assuming that the listeners of your show are mostly spiritually oriented. So you want someone that you're on the same page with, if you're an older person, because you have to be able to refer, to common understandings of Islam. And there's lots of different understandings of Islam. I'm not saying that they have to be, for instance, have the exact same sheikh necessarily, but you want to have someone who has, a common understanding. One thing that I thought was good advice is you find someone with also the same madhab if you're following a madhab, because having like the household and a different understanding of madhab, having a different sheikh, having different, like lots of different ideas, it just becomes, it's that extra bit of work that to find, what's the common ground or the compromise between these different points of view on lots of things. So culture as well. So basically the same things that we would look for, hopefully, maybe we didn't look for in our first marriage, but we should think about in terms of, equality, right? Or, trying to find someone who's really an equal, or who mirrors our situation, someone with a similar cultural background. I mean, I'm not saying, and I'm not racist in any kind of way, and I think that intercultural marriages can be great and wonderful, but to the extent that you don't have to discuss every little thing with this new husband, and that certain things are just understood and already agreed on, that's just going to make your life easier. You know, if you come from the same country, because I mean, okay, when you're young, and this happens, I think, a lot, when we're young, people from different cultures, different countries, and so forth, it can be very fascinating and interesting and seem adventurous and so forth to marry them. And then, you know, as we get older and we find out everything about their culture, what's typically happens, it's interesting, like after 10, 15, 20 years, is there's other parts of their culture that actually you didn't know anything about, which you don't really like necessarily, which become a little bit more tiresome. And a lot of people, by the time they get to be 35 or 40, they tend to revert back to what they experienced from childhood and what they sort of were raised with. And so it's something to consider. Um, are you more comfortable in your skin with someone who has, you know, more culturally in common with you, whether it has to do with like an ethnic culture, or it has to do with maybe a social class or an intellectual culture, whatever it is that makes you feel comfortable. Like when you're home, you know, Allah has made marriage as something so we find, you know, comfort, right? And ease, right? Sakina. So we want to find Sakina in our spouse. And that has to do a lot with our own makeup. Maybe you'll say, well, I need to find someone of the same mizaj, temperament, you know, whatever it is, there's things that we have in common. For instance, you're quite introverted, like don't marry a super extrovert necessarily, you know. You're very intellectual, you know, don't marry someone who's like just highly technical with their feet on the ground and just talking about, you know, because you want to have things in common, right? If you're an intuitive type, then you want to have someone maybe who understands that you have to have enough things in common. Basically, if you're a very hyper organized person that gets up like 6 o'clock in every morning and likes to be early for every appointment, and you know is a minimalist and like, you know, wants to have their things in order all the time, then don't marry like a night owl who stays up till 4 o'clock in the morning and sleeps till 12, and you know has messy papers everywhere and throws his socks everywhere and stuff like that. I mean, just, you know, because now we can be more thoughtful and you know, you're not going to find a perfect match, but whichever things are most important to you, which you know are going to really get on your nerves, if it's going to really get on your nerves, especially those daily things like every day he's late or every day you're late and every day he wants to be on time, those kind of things, which like you're super organized and he's super sloppy, if those are the things which you know are going to get on your nerves every single day, like just don't go there. You know, just make that another consideration. Try to find things that, you know, you want to, you know, like your garments for each other, you want to feel like that husband can be like a comfortable old coat or something. You know what I'm saying? That you just like, it fits, you know, and you feel very comfy. That's it.
Right.
Inshallah.
So then let's
Yeah.
talk about this comfort, because, you know, many people in this day and age, we want our spouses to fulfill us intellectually and spiritually and physically and mentally and everything. What do you think about that? I think I know what you think about that. Why don't you share with us?
Well, you know, this life is the life of test, and the akhirah comes after this life, right? So I think people have to realize that, you know, they're not going to reach their Jannah in this life. They're just not going to. The reason that we're put together with other people is to refine our characters. And so there's got to be something annoying and irritating in our spouses that's going to help refine our characters. I mean, that's just how it is. But so we don't want to make a choose, you know, to choose something especially difficult, although there have been saints who have done that. And there's a barakah in that they can reach high degrees through that. But also, you know, we have to be realistic. And physical things will fade. If we're going into our second marriage and we've been married already 10 or 15 years in the past, it depends. Like if you've been married just 2 years and, you know, you're still young. So physical things can be quite important to you still, but let's be realistic. We're all going to get wrinkles. We're going to get older. We're going to slow down. We're going to get, things are going to happen for our body. We're going to get illnesses, you know, and we're going to have to help care for our spouses, or they might have to care for us as well with our illnesses and things. So let's be realistic about physical things. They're less important. The spiritual things, religious things, those are most important. And also that you have things in common that you like to do together. You know, if you both like to take walks, or you both like to read together, you're going to have fun like reading at night, or I don't know, you like to go out and watch.
Blendable lifestyles.
Yeah, you have to enjoy doing some things together, because most of the time you'll not be doing things together. Most of the time he will be doing his thing and you'll be doing your thing. And apparently in the average good marriage, according to the Gottmans, you know, if they have like a 15-minute good talk at dinner time, and they go out like once a week for 2 hours as a date, and you know they have probably whatever frequency of marital relations suits both, like that is the definition essentially of a good marriage. You know, you're going to have, you have your girlfriends and he has his male friends, and you have your family and he has his family, and you have your work or your volunteering or your children or what is keeping you occupied during the day, and he has his work, which can be very important to him. So, the time that you do have together, you have to enjoy doing some things together that are not going to be too strained. Basically, maybe you like to go to community events together. Maybe you like to do dhikr together. Hopefully, you're going to do a few prayers together in the day at least. Maybe you're going to read some hadith together. Yeah, inshallah.
Okay, thanks. And now, many women out there, they are quite disillusioned when they realize that the second marriage process or subsequent marriage process is much longer than they anticipated, and that they might actually never be able to get married. If you just look at the statistics, the singles out there, and of course the pool of women is much, much larger than the pool of single men. And also,
is that really true? I'm not sure. I feel like it's just that men find it easier to remarry, but I'm not sure. I mean, there aren't like tremendously more.
I believe that's what it's been shown, especially, and also when you attend these marriage events and things. I've heard, I actually have a friend in Cape Town, they had to cancel the marriage event because there were not enough guys to attend. There are always lots and lots and lots of women, and they've got to put a cap on the women registrants because they're
Well, I think that one of the issues here, and this is something which the imams have to deal with and the communities have to deal with, is that men obviously, at least according to several madhab, can live in a non-Muslim country and they can marry a non-Muslim woman. And I think that is one of the factors that does reduce the number of available Muslim men, is that they may be marrying Christian or Jewish or basically nominally Christian or Jewish women. And like in the Maliki madhab, for instance, they shouldn't do that if they're unless they're living in a Muslim country, because this obviously is going to reduce the pool, and then that puts this pressure on Muslim women. And then there are Muslim women who try to convert otherwise nice guys who are not Muslim, and that can sometimes work, but a lot of times they're also become nominally Muslim, and then the woman finds herself basically unhappy with the husband who is American or English or Canadian or something, who is maybe not the kind of role model, that she wanted to have for her children. So this is one of the issues I think that does affect communities, and which imams should be more aware of, because at least in some fiqh, it's makruh, to marry a non-Muslim woman if Muslim women are available and should be married. So that's one of the issues. I think another issue is the obvious possibility of taking a second wife. And sometimes, in some cases, a man might he can find an easier match, and a second wife may be someone from so-called back home from another country or something like that. So you might have, the marriage pool coming from abroad that does affect it, or, the marriage pool coming from non-Muslims. So these are different issues, but I mean, overall, I'm not sure that there are a lot of more women generally than Muslim men. But anyway, Allah knows best. Yeah. How to deal with that? Allah, has written what we have, has written our spouses in advance. We have to trust in Allah, and we have to ask Allah and return to Him. It's one of the things that's written for us. When we our souls are put in our mother's womb, and so that's one of the things that it's qadr, Allah, qadr of Allah. So trust in Allah that the right person will come around at the right time, and otherwise try not to focus too much on it, because it can become a kind of an obsession or a distraction from everything else. It can be a means of distracting you from your children, who need you. And children are always permanently in one's life ordinarily, whereas a husband might come or go, but the children will always be there. And after that, the grandchildren.
You mentioned to me before that perhaps the relationship with the child could be the most meaningful and long-lasting relationship that a woman might have in her life, right?
It can be. I mean, it's been said that the woman's relationship with her eldest son is very significant, particularly, and probably the father with his eldest daughter. So yeah, these are very significant relationships as well, obviously. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, if people have been just watching too much TV and movies, they need to, like, you could have wonderful, deep friendships, with other sisters, with other relatives. I mean, let's widen our circle of friendships, inshallah, and keep busy with creative projects. If we're feeling frustrated, it's also good to have some kind of emotional release or creative release. It could be writing, it could be art, it could be walking. there's a lot of things that we can do with our hands or physically that's going to help us with this energy. We can maybe play sports, we can do jogging. There's other things that we could be doing with ourselves that just making ourselves happy and feeling good. So think about the things and not to get, think about these other things and not get too focused on the remarriage. I'm going to say be distracted from it. Yeah.
And then lastly, because you have such a huge amount of experience working with children and you have several children yourself, what advice or recommendations you'd give to a woman who's navigating being either a single mom or even just, co-parenting in terms of like the healthy tarbiyah of the child, well-being, a grounded child, feeling emotionally secure, etc. Anything that you'd like to say about children in general?
Oh, that's a very big topic.
It's a big
book
topic. It's probably a topic on its own.
topic.
It's probably a topic on its own, which I would love to touch on with you at another time. But if you could just give us yani al-khulasa, like a overall summary.
I think it's very important to connect with each child as an individual daily. That don't just treat, if you have more than one child, don't just treat them as a group where you're just doing things for the kids, because each child needs their own time. And I would say that each week, for sure, that you have a little time one-on-one with each child, so they know that they're getting this personal attention. And if they know they're going to have a little date with you, you're going to take them shopping by taking turns with them, or you're going to take them out, as just a one-on-one thing, they're less likely to be clingy to you because they know that they have their apportioned time with you. So, don't wait until children are desperately trying to get your attention. Is give them the attention first until they feel confident and they feel that they're ready to go on their own, because when they feel enough attention, they will not want to stay with you forever. They'll have enough, So when they're feeling enough, then they'll go. If they always have to come to you, it's not a good sign. So, but also, it's difficult if you only have one child, because the child is going to be coming to you a lot. Whereas if you have two or more, they're going to be entertaining each other. So that is a fact about things. So we're going to try to find good friends for them, good companions for them, without being ultra fussy about it. And also realizing that our children can sometimes be the cause of trouble between two children, because there are a lot of mothers who are very, very protective of their children. And especially young mothers these days, I feel like they'd rather have their child be alone than playing with other children. That's not healthy. They need to have some disagreements and get into, social issues with other children. They need to learn from that. That's important. Mm-hmm. If you're isolated and by yourself, you need to find a good community. Mm-hmm. You can maybe find a good Muslim school. An Islamic school could be a good community, because a lot of times informal communities will develop around schools, because mothers are seeing each other a lot and the children want to have play dates. So that's one way of creating a community for yourself. Or you might have a mosque community, or a spiritual community that you belong to. But that community is important to help support you and your child. It's important for you to find aunts and uncles for your child, that they can relate to, so that they can have relationships with other people, that you're not just isolated with your child in an apartment by yourself or in a little house by yourself. Maybe they're going to Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, or they're, doing archery club. They might be doing swimming club. They might be whatever kind of things they can do, where they're, karate or some kind of martial arts, where they're getting out and they have these other networks, so they're having a healthy range of things that they're doing. Hopefully you're not allowing them too much time on screen time, and that you're monitoring their screen time. That's very important. So they're having opportunities to create healthy friendships for themselves, and to know other adults besides just yourself and your husband, and maybe your in-laws or your own parents, that they're having, they're getting these positive role models from other people in the community. That's very important.
I have seen those single mothers who are working so much, they're working so hard, and they don't have enough finances to put their children into karate and all these other extracurricular activities. And so then they just put their child on a screen, because it keeps the child quiet and occupied, and they don't feel like there's no other way out of that cycle.
You just have to pretend that screen wasn't invented yet, because that's going to destroy your child. And that will only be a temporary fix, and you're going to have to deal with all the issues of addiction later on. So just pretend it hasn't been invented, and just buy them real toys and let them learn to play with real toys. And what I mean by real toys are toys that don't do things on their own, toys that have to engage the child's imagination, where the child has to make it do something, like a non-speaking doll, an unfinished kind of a toy like Lego, or like building blocks, or like train sets, or kitchen set, whatever, things that the child has to do something to. Okay, and where they have to essentially get bored and then find something to do with it. The child has to get bored. If you're thinking that the solution for everything is the child is never bored, the child is not going to develop their brain. They won't develop their imagination. They won't be able to think. They'll be very dependent. They're very, very passive. And then when that child gets to be older, they're going to be a real trial. And basically, this is my advice about children. Like, if you don't give children enough attention and time when they are young, they are going to forcefully take it from you when they are older. And you will not be able to escape, because you're either going to do something horrifying, like the police will arrive at their door because they've been shoplifting, or they've gotten in some kind of fight, or they have something terrible will happen. They will have been found with some kind of, whether it's cigarettes, like alcohol, drug, they'll be experimenting because they're missing that attention. They have to have the attention.
Right.
You have to do everything to give them the attention, like everything. Basically, they need to have human attention. They cannot be sat in front of a screen. That is just not the solution. It could be it just can't be the solution. Just forget the screen. That's it. Because the children are turning into kind of the zombies. And then, say my position as like head teacher of school and teachers, I've had parents coming to me crying, like just saying, like, can you please convince my child not to be, hours in their room on the screen? But I can't, because now they're like 13 or 14 years old and they've been doing it for years. It's too late. Yeah. And that is not going to help you in any kind of way. And then you're going to deal with whatever repercussions for the rest of that child's life and whoever they marry or whatever children they have. I mean, it's a serious problem. It's a serious problem. They have to be able to develop themselves naturally. I know some parents, they feel that they're having a very spiritual life, and they think that a lot of things is materialistic. And so they want to have a minimalistic life for their child as well, so they won't buy them toys. Now, you have to understand that, or they'll just buy them a few things, and they think that more than a few things that are out is like too messy, or it's too much or something. You have to understand that in a natural situation, say in the old village that people grew up in, the children were outside all the time with other kids, and they could turn all kinds of things into toys, and had a lot of things at their disposal. They could make things with sticks and stones and clay, and they could climb, and they could make clubhouses, and they could, make adventures and so forth. So in a sense, if you have one child at home or two children at home, you have to have these substitute things. If you're not going to have a personal sandbox and a personal stream that the children are going to be playing in and all that, then you have to create these diversions in the house. It's not materialism, it's stimulation of the child's, in imagination and the skills that they're going to learn from that. Yeah. So they need to have these opportunities for imaginative play and also for building skills. And they can be helping you in the house as well. They can have little miniature things in the kitchen that are quite similar to your things, that, large ones. And yeah, they can be learning to sweep and clean and mop and all of that as well. But they have to do real things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So maybe women can get together. If there's single mothers together, they can create like little groups where they can look after each other's children, and they take turns, taking them out to the park or something like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are things you can do it like low budget. With just you got a best friend, take turns, bring them to the park. If you have 3 or 4 of you, it'll be easy. Yeah, something like that, inshallah.
Mm-hmm. Anything else you'd like to add generally in closing before we end?
Well, life is hard. Life is hard. I mean, motherhood is full of tests. People shouldn't blame themselves for everything. A lot of things are out of our hands, so not to be too hard on ourselves. And like I said, just return to Allah and ask Allah for openings. Pray for your children all the time. Allah hears the mother's prayer for the child. And, pray for guidance, not to lose hope, never lose hope. Even if children have done something, quite naughty, and we feel very frustrated, and we shouldn't despair and lose hope. Yeah. And always keep the relationship with the child. Sometimes Allah sends a child as a trial also to a parent. We know the story of Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam and his son. We know the story of Musa and Sayyidina Khidr, and the youth that was trying their parents. Yeah. So you can have religious parents can also have, children who go astray. And even though we do our best, but inshallah, we have this time with our children every day. We're doing prayers with them every day. We're reading some hadith or something with them every day, and some Quran, and making it fun and lively and wonderful for them, inshallah. But if they happen to go for a period of going astray, at least maintain that relationship with them, because you never know, when they get older, they may want to come back, and you have to have a path for them to come back. That's important as well. So keep that relationship. I've just heard that again from a very lovely and religious sister. She and her husband are, they work very hard for dawah, and one of their children is seemingly gone astray for a period, but they keep that relationship. Yeah, the relationship is very important. And Allah give everyone tawfiq and
Ameen.
blessings and ease, and just keep our eye on the afterlife. Inshallah, this is a test. It's going to be a test.
Thank you so much, Ustadha Fatima, filled with many bezels of wisdom. So thank you so much. And we wish you all the best for you and your family. And may Allah.
My pleasure. All right then, take care.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.